Alright, so we're going to be dealing with interacting between the two Adobe creative programs, Illustrator and Photoshop. And this first movie is going to be dealing with moving from Illustrator to Photoshop with different artwork, how you can open up these things, how you can keep them editable or be destructive with them. There's a lot of different answers to this workflow, which is really kind of cool. You just kind of have to understand the difference between all these different options. So in your exercises folder, you'll see a file called curlers, and that's going to be what I'm working with here. And it's just a very simple line art drawing of this woman at a hair salon. Is she getting a perm? Yeah, I think that's a perm. Her hair's in curlers, so yeah, I think it's a perm. Anyways, I turned all the solid artwork from this, which is there were really no strokes at all in my original artwork, but I just for the sake of this exercise, I turned it all to strokes and no fills, and so everything's transparent except for the stroke. I want to talk about getting the artwork over to Photoshop now. So if I was just going to start from scratch in Photoshop, because maybe what I wanted to do was go down this path, this method of digital illustration or digital painting, where I do some vector line work in Illustrator as sort of my basis, and then move to a program like Photoshop where I can get a bit more technical with my painting and have quite a few more options as far as how that process would work, as opposed to using a paintbrush in Illustrator, which, Illustrator, yes, it has a paintbrush, but it's really not the greatest paint program. That's because it's vector-based. So it'd be ideal to move to a raster or pixel-based program like Photoshop or Painter or something like that. So a couple of ways to go through this process. I'm going to open up Photoshop now, and I have just a sort of a generic file open here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the difference between opening, placing, and then copying and pasting. So if I was to go to File, Open, and open the Illustrator file in Photoshop, there's a few things you need to look at. If it's selected, you should notice down here it says Format, Photoshop PDF. It is an Illustrator file, so obviously Photoshop's not going to be able to open an Illustrator file natively. So it has to do some sort of converting in order for it to really work. In this case, it's going to treat it as if it were a PDF. And the way that this is actually happening is that when you save an Illustrator file, there is a window that pops up that asks if you'd like to save PDF information. And if it is checked, then you end up being able to go into other programs where it would basically sort of ignore all the Illustrator junk, but pay attention to PDF information. So that's what's happening here. So if I hit open, I get a window that pops up that says, do you want to go with pages or images? A page is fine. Basically, it's the artboard. What's the name of it? How do you want to crop your information? You're going to crop by the bounding box, which is if all that artwork, if all those paths were selected, they would have a bounding box around it. Or do you want to go by the art box, which would be the artboard? Or if you had made a trim or a crop or a bleed, you have these other options here as well. Anti-aliased just means it's going to help raster that file super cleanly and make sure that curved lines look nice, corners look good, and so on. You have a chance to alter its size here, and its resolution, and its color mode. This is all because it's a vector file, And vector file, as you all know from the very first thing you ever did in this class, was to identify the difference between vector and raster, and everyone pretty much answered with how you can scale it infinitely without losing any of its clarity. And so this is a chance where you have right here to say, well, I'd like it to be bigger, or let's make it smaller. So it's a pretty nice opportunity that you have here. And if you hit OK, then it just places it. Ooh, I shouldn't use that word. It just puts it in to a file, and these are, if I get my eraser, that's a pretty small eraser. Let's make it a little bit bigger. You can see it's now pixels. I can treat it just like paint of any other element that you would make in Photoshop. And if I look at my layer window over here, it just has a little thumbnail of the lines, and that's it. These are pixels. So when you open up an Illustrator file in Photoshop through File Open, it'll convert it to a PDF, or it'll read it through PDF conversion, and then treat it as if they are just pixels. So you've lost any editability as far as these vector paths go, which is fine if that's what you need to do, if that's part of your workflow, if you don't care about retaining that vector information. So you know, in this case, it's an illustration, but it could be text, it could be a logo, it could be, you know, a lot of things that you would be working with in Illustrator because of the power of Illustrator being the vector stuff, and then taking it over to something where it's more pixel oriented, like Photoshop. So that's what happens if you open up an Illustrator file. I'm going to close that. And the other way that we could do it would be through File, Place. And this actually gives us a few more options. When you choose Place and you select your Illustrator file, you can see that it still is referencing this as a Photoshop PDF. And when I hit Place, I get the window. It's not as detailed as the other one. It just wants to know, do you go on page by image, or how are you going to crop? When you hit OK, it will temporarily place the image in your document as a new layer, but we're in a transform mode here, so you can see the little bounding box, the X that goes through it, and then all my handles. This is the chance that I get to rescale this artwork before I commit to anything. So yeah, the options dialog box didn't have as many options in it, but what was really gone was, what do you want to scale this thing to? Here, it won't ask you about resolution because I'm going into a document that has a specified resolution. In this case, this document is only 72 pixels per inch. But it is giving me the chance to scale this up or down and rotate it, whatever. So if I go to a corner, and you know, obviously you'd want to keep things in proportion. If you hold down Shift, it'll keep it in proportion. But if I scale it up, move it around a little bit, put her just like this, I guess. Just if Photoshop is new to you here, then please don't expect me to get into Photoshop. That's a whole nother class. But what's going on is, since I'm in a transform and I have those handles and you see this little X through there, I have to commit. I have to tell Photoshop I'm happy with what I've got here. And committing to the transformation, you can use this little checkbox up in the little control bar, little check mark deal. If you don't like it, you can hit cancel. Or the equivalent of that would be return for commit and escape. Oh crap, I went to point to it, but I actually hit it. Oh boy, let's put you in there again, scale it up, and you're somewhere in there. It's a little big. You gotta make the noises. Okay, good. Now I'm gonna hit return. And then what you're gonna see is that the lines are super smooth very clear and crisp. And that's the result of it, the adaptation, whatever, of this artwork originally being vector. So something is still different here. If I try to use my eraser, I get the bloop, and it says, hey, this is a smart object, it needs to be rasterized, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to hit cancel. This placed artwork from Illustrator is a smart object, is what Photoshop calls it. And a smart object has a different thumbnail. The thumbnail over in the layers window has this tiny little box in there that's the smart object icon. What that means is that this is merely a reference to an outside file. So I cannot alter it here unless I chose to rasterize it. So this smart object is a reference to the illustration created in Illustrator with vector tools. Okay, so this layer in the layer window, if I wanted to make a change, all I have to do is double click on the little thumbnail icon where the little smart object is. I get this little warning thing that says, okay, after you edit this, make sure to choose File, Save, and then those changes will be reflected upon returning to this Photoshop document. So I'm going to choose OK. Oh, okay, it's fine. Okay, so it opens up a file called Vector Smart Object. It's no longer called curlers. So there's this weird thing that's kind of happening in the background of these applications, and it's sort of created and stashed this this new smart object as vector artwork. So I could, I could say, oh, her mask, she's wearing a mask, by the way, like a salon mask, a mud mask. I could come in, I could select these points and paths and kind of try to make it, a little more like the one on the right, and a little more pointy. And now I see some things I could fix over here. There we go. All right, so now that I've made a change there, what else could I do? I don't need to really do anything else. It looks fine. I might just say, I don't like this over there, this little bit. I'm just going to get rid of that. And likewise, I'll get rid of that one. Simplify a little bit. In fact, maybe I'll just get rid of all those weird little highlight things. I never really liked them anyways. Sure. All right. So now that I've made changes, if I do save, and this is very important, you want to do File Save, not File Save As. Because Save As will think that you're saving something completely different now, something new, something different, and will put it in your computer, and that reference that Photoshop needed will be broken. So you have to do Save. So I'm going to do Save, and now if I go back to Photoshop, it's automatically updated. So it's this really great live relationship between these programs with this one element. And this is going to keep going. I could just, I could start working in Photoshop, start doing some painting, realize that I'm not happy with something of the vector artwork, and then I could go back and edit that by double-clicking on that smart object. So that is a smart object. The other way to get artwork from Illustrator into Photoshop would be directly copying and pasting that stuff over. So I'm just going to throw this layer in the trash from Photoshop, start over. I'm going to come over here now. This is not the Vector Smart Object. I want the original artwork. I'm going to select all of this artwork, and I'm going to choose Copy. So it's now in my clipboard. If I go back to Photoshop, that information's still copied in the clipboard. I can go Edit, Paste. And when I choose Paste, I get a new window that says, how would you like to paste it? Would you like to paste it as a smart object? And that would give me the results just like placing the file. I can paste as pixels, and that will rasterize the all of the lines into basically paint. I could paste it as a path, and a path in Photoshop, you can do a lot of things with a path, but it'll never print like it would in Illustrator, but you can make selections or stroke paths or whatever. You can do all kinds of stuff. Or you could create a shape layer. So the two that you'll use most often will be either a smart object or pixels. There will be an occasion when you want to use something that you've created in Illustrator and paste it into Photoshop as a path, and I'll do something very simple as a path in a little bit. So smart object, if I hit OK, here it is. It's a new layer. It'll be a smart object layer as soon as I commit to the transformation that I want, so I have my chance to scale it up as big as I wanted. I'm peeking off this side there or whatever. So if I went this way, it's a vector smart object. I still have the access to its vector information and editability. I'm going to throw that away. Now if I did paste again and I chose pixels, there's the bounding box, the transform box. I can still get in there and change its scale if I wanted to. Right there is good. Commit to it. Now the difference being this is no longer a smart object, this is paint. These are pixels. So I can erase them without getting a warning. I can start manipulating them as you could manipulate pixels, but I cannot grab points along a path. This is no longer a path. Photoshop has rendered it as, pixels. So no more editing there. But it gives me the chance to come in, put a layer underneath it, and grab my paintbrush and start putting my mud mask on her. And I've got these beautiful, crisp, clean, uniform lines that are from Illustrator, which are a little bit different than the ones you'd get from painting in Photoshop, unless you were using the pen tool in Photoshop and then creating strokes or something, which really is not the most economical and viable way to do that. You're much better off working with a program that was intended for that kind of work. So there's my little mud mask. But why wouldn't I just use a fill, right, in Illustrator if that's all I wanted? But the power of Photoshop becomes one in which, if I wanted to start doing some fun painting, that's not what I want to do here. Come on, a little bigger. If I wanted to do more dynamic painting, maybe with like my mixer brush or something, start smudging and pushing wet paint around, that's something that I would not be able to do in Illustrator and have that really kind of cool painting dynamic where I've got all these cool little things I can do with new kind of paint tools that are part of CS5. Sorry for anyone who doesn't have CS5, but oh man, it's so nice to be able to deal with wet paint. Yeah, I'm getting lost. This always happens in class when I start painting. I just get sucked into it. Anyways, so here's an example of how you could go about some advanced digital painting, having your initial outlines done in Illustrator, and then going in and doing all your layering and your painting in the old Pshop. Yeah, so that is pasting, copying and pasting. I'm going to throw you away. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to say, let's just grab an eye. And if I just copy and paste the eye as a path, there's my path. And this is a path that I can use some of these tools in Photoshop to, you know, maintain some editability, but that little line right there is not a stroke. It's just showing me the path. This path, I have to do certain things too in order for it to actually perform. I have to work with the path panel and then make some executions. When am I creating a selection out of it? Am I, you know, gonna stroke it or something like that? So there is the transformation of that vector information from Illustrator to Photoshop. Only Photoshop is not made to be a vector program. It has some vector tools, but only so that you can accomplish a few things, and then your output out of Photoshop always gets rid of the vector information. It turns it into pixels. So that's that. Delete. Go away. All right. So there's the different ways to get Illustrator artwork into Photoshop. And this is a very simple illustration. You know, colors will translate. Most things will translate. You will find that you'll run into some trouble with some special effects or some drop shadows or maybe even like the 3D tool, whatever. But for the most part, it goes back and forth real well. So in the next movie, we'll talk about going from Photoshop to Illustrator.